Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brabber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we have got a lot of NBA news to talk about with you guys, and we got to start with the big story of the day. Trae Young, Logan, traded to the Washington Wizards in a really bizarre situation overall. Washington was his preferred destination, and we've heard rumblings about a potential Trae Atlanta breakup, and it's made sense for the basketball reasons we've talked about. But this escalated super quickly from it being like a concrete report, okay, Trae is working with the team and his agents to find a new home for him. And then like a day later, it had happened and he was a Wizard. And the other weird thing here is the return, the fact that you're trading a 27-year-old star, you get no draft capital back. It's CJ McCollum, 34 years old on an expiring contract, and Corey Kispert. So before we get into the specifics of how we like this trade for Atlanta and Washington respectively, I want to just dive into the peculiarity of this deal for all those reasons we just laid out and what that says about Trae Young, where the league is at with him, and where he may be at in his career right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just tells you about his value across the league, the fact that you couldn't get a better return for this. How much do you think? I have to think that the contract played a huge part in this 100%. As well, right? The fact that he's making $49 million this year. He's got a player option next season. And so I definitely think that has a major part of teams not wanting to really invest heavily in him. The fact that it's not guaranteed that you're going to have him on a long-term deal, right? He could opt out after this season. And the fact that if he does accept it, you still do have to pay the guy $49 million, so it's a huge allocation of your salary cap. So I think...
And then reasonably probably going to extend him at another max figure, if not close to it.
Exactly. And so I think that has a huge part to do with it and why his value is at an all-time low across the league. I also think it just has to do with his archetype, Carson. I think you touched on this on our TikTok, and you guys can check that video out too, but just like where the NBA is headed in a direction, and it's weird. I didn't think it was going to be this fast, man. Like, we talked about this at the beginning of the year, a month into the season. Guys,
we talked about it a million times this year already.
We've brought it up, and even so, I didn't think it was going to be, like you said, this fast, man. This is one of the most rapidly, like, exponentially rapid trade deals I've ever seen, man. The fact that literally 2 days ago, Shams is like, reports, Hawks and Trae done, bridges burnt. A day later, we've got a deal done. But yeah, I really do think it speaks to a kind of league-wide kind of mentality shift, one about small guards and how hard it is to build around them, but not just small guards, ball-dominant guys who have limited off-ball value as well, and how it makes it harder for teammates to play alongside you too, not just in how it stresses a defense. Like, I just think this is more emblematic of a league-wide trend that is kind of souring on this archetype.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And we have been monitoring the situation back to the preseason. I remember looking at this roster and thinking, okay, this is really the best kind of group you could put around Trae. They've got a lot of talent around him. They've got other dudes who can handle, so maybe you could get him off the ball a little bit more. And most importantly, they've got a bunch of athletes who should be able to cover up for him on the defensive end, and he should be able to slot in as the lead half-court creator for this team. If this version of building a team around Trae doesn't work, I don't really know what version is. And early in the year, the trend started to develop of, okay, they were struggling with him before he got hurt, and then they went on a really good stretch without him, and Jaylen Johnson emerged, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker emerged, and you really started to have the question, are they just actually better without Trae Young? Or at the very least, and more importantly, is Trae Young bringing $46 million of value to this team? Is he improving them by an amount that justifies that sort of contract? And the answer has pretty much been a clear and resounding no. They've been really bad when Trae has been on the court this year. And we just talked about this last NBA show because, again, this has been a super interesting situation to monitor. That hasn't all been about him. The Hawks have really just let go of the rope defensively overall in this recent stretch of the season. And Trae being on the floor makes that much, much worse. He's not the sole problem there, but they have had a 129 defensive rating when he's on the floor, which is completely untenable. They have been a really bad basketball team when Trae is out there. And so considering they feel like we've got our building block now in Jaylen Johnson and we've got a gnaw on a really good value contract, it makes total sense that they would want to move on from Trae. And like you're saying, Trae is maybe the most perfect example of the good and the bad with this archetype that we're talking about, but he is not the only one. When I made that TikTok that you're mentioning, talking about this sort of league-wide trend, the other guy who I think about is Ja Morant, another guy who is having a career worst kind of season, whose team is obviously extremely low on him, who hasn't been impacting winning, hasn't been a positive, hasn't been even close to justifying his contract. These are two guys who a half decade ago were really being presented as like upcoming faces of the league as offensive guards. And I think they've always had core flaws that made me lower on them than people were at their apex. I mean, especially Ja, I've been really low on, and Trae, I was kind of optimistic things could work out this year, but there's always been these major issues they have that put a hard ceiling on their individual ability, how good a team built around them can be. They both have severe efficiency issues as scorers. For Ja, it's because of the complete lack of reliable perimeter shot making. With Trae, it's the inconsistent perimeter shot making and finishing issues. And then, as you said, they are hyper ball dominant, and they are high turnover players, and they are terrible defenders. So for all those reasons, they've always been more appealing as like floor raisers than guys who you look at as being a top 2 player on an elite basketball team. But even though all those flaws have always been there, the league today is exposing those flaws more so. And so the reality is, it's not just that we look at Trae and Ja and we're like, oh, 5 years ago, they were so talented at 21, 22 years old, and we were optimistic that some of these flaws were going to get ironed out. And at this point, like, it's just run its course and everybody's tired and everybody has seen, okay, they can only do so much to elevate a team. Because I do think that things were probably inevitably going to come to that point, but these guys are also legitimately less effective than they were a half decade ago. These guys have, relative to the league, regressed in terms of their value, and that's because of all the changes that we've been talking about. The increased sophistication in defensive scheme. The pick and roll revolution was at its peak 5 years ago. But obviously there was always a push and pull in this league. And when you get better at something, okay, now everybody needs to figure out how to counter that thing. And we've gotten to a place where teams are so smart with their defensive schemes. Defensive personnel is even better. Teams are so adept in terms of putting together switching lineups, which for Trae is a huge problem because he's a guy who can bust up a lot of conventional pick and roll coverages. But if you've got a super athletic switching team that can force him to have to try to beat guys on an island, good athletes, that's always been a struggle for him. So teams are just better at doing that stuff now. And also, as you have more guys like Jaylen Johnson, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who didn't come into the league as ball handlers necessarily, and who aren't your lead ball handlers, but who have developed the skill to become supplementary, secondary, legitimate ball handlers who can do good stuff for you with the ball in their hands too. It's just very unappealing to look at a player like Trae Young or a player like Ja Morant and say, okay, our offense is going to be put the ball in your hands for the entire game, knowing that you do still have these offensive flaws that are significant, though you may be very talented, and we're just going to run 25 stagnant pick and rolls a game. Nobody wants to do that today, and for good reason. Those guys are going to be exposed for their offensive flaws to a point. You need more offensive variety. You need to be ultimately attacking defensive weak links effectively, and you need multiple skilled players on the floor who are empowered with the ball in their hands who can do that. And then that's the other side of this, right? Trae has always been a horrible defender. Everybody's always known that. But he is more damaging, he and all these other small guards who can't defend at all, to his team than ever before because of how offensive principles and offensive focuses have changed in the league. Again, to be more so than ever predicated upon putting weak defenders into the action every single time. A small guard cannot hide defensively in the NBA like they could a decade ago or previously. And so when you consider all the offensive flaws that a Trae Young has, and then you consider that he is as damaging to your defense as anybody in the NBA, again, we can have the conversation about, is he even a net positive for your team? And for the Hawks this year, he hasn't been. But you can also say to me, yeah, in a certain situation with his offensive floor raising abilities, his advantage creation, his elite playmaking, the volume he can take on, yeah, he can still be a net positive in the right situation. But is it a $50 million positive? Is it, this guy is the building block? This is the guy who I'm putting everything on? No, it can't be, because when you try to visualize how you build a great team around Trae Young in today's NBA, again, it's essentially possible. Things have to be perfect. You have to be like, let's put the best defensive roster ever and the best group of play finishers, but not dudes who need to have the ball to step on his toes. But then we also need an elite mismatch attacking big, because if we face a switching scheme, they need to be cover up for Trae because he can't beat switches. Like, it's just totally unfeasible at this point. So that's why this all went down as it did. I think it's very clear that the Hawks could not have moved off of Trae soon enough, that they saw the writing on the wall clearly and that things had run their course. And they would much rather have the flexibility that is afforded to them being off of Trae Young's big contract, because this is essentially a salary dump move. CJ obviously has zero role in this team's future. He's going to be gone after this year. He can do some stuff for them this year, but they just wanted to be out of the Trae Young business. And I think that makes total sense. This was a prove it or lose it year for Trae. We knew that coming in. We've talked about it incessantly, and he may have only played 10 games, but he lost it because of how they looked when he was on the court and because of how other players have developed and how things have looked when he was off the court, and ultimately their vision in having a higher ceiling for building a team around a guy like Jaylen Johnson and some of these other pieces than trying to figure out how do we build a great team while also working around all of Trae Young's major flaws in this NBA that is really exposing those flaws.
Yeah, and I kind of want to hammer home that point about his teammates, about it takes sacrifice from those guys.
100%.
You know what I mean? And so it's got to be incredibly frustrating for those guys. Like, you know what I mean? We can't think of basketball in terms of straight up, binary numbers and analytics and stuff like that. There's a human,
just because a player theoretically has a skill set, they are always going to
Exactly.
completely buy into maxing that out. This is what we talked about with their defensive fall off. Just real quick, Jaylen Johnson and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, they really found this offensive success without Trae. To realize the best version of this team as I envisioned it, again, covering up for all of Trae's issues, that was going to require non-Jaylen Johnson completely buying in defensively,
Exactly.
maxing out their value, being like, we are complementary players who are trying to make things work around Trae Young. They didn't want to do that. Their defensive value has depreciated, understandably so, as their offensive volume has gone up. And when Trae got back in the lineup for a handful of games, they didn't just flip the switch and say, oh, right, now I'm a defensive-focused role player, because they don't want to do that. And Trae Young, realistically, isn't good enough to justify making talented basketball players do that.
Well said. I was just going to say there's a human component in this, and I think they have just
100%.
reached their wits' end with playing with him. And I think it speaks to, again, the rigidity of his play style and what his drawbacks are. I want to ask you specifically, before we dive into these team things.
Yeah.
You were talking about this with Ja, and you were talking about this with Trae. And I think they're two different players, because you and I have never been all that high on Ja Morant, but we have been high on Trae Young because of what he can do for a team's offense. When you're talking about him regressing, and we all know about his play style drawbacks, is there anything that you see tangibly, maybe athletically, in Trae's game where he has actually regressed in terms of like his ability or his athleticism or something like that? Like, is there any other reason outside of teams defending him differently or how the Hawks play, like actually with Trae individually, that you think has really regressed?
No, I really don't think so. I would say, like, he hasn't had his best shot-making seasons. If you look back at, like, 2022, okay, when he's shooting 38% from three at that volume, obviously that's going to make him a better offensive player than if he's shooting 34% from three like last year, or 30% from three like he's been this year. But I really do think it is more so the fact that he is an incredibly rigid player. And although he may be very skilled, again, in terms of just barbecuing drop, right, with his elite interior passing, his elite lob passing, and his ability to beat you with the floater game, his ability to trap a defender on his back, get a guy in jail, draw a foul, he can make all of the reads and really make all the plays he needs to be an extremely effective offensive player in that one specific way. But when you get to the playoffs, for example, and you're going up against elite defensive teams with versatile personnel who can mix up their scheme, and they're able to, again, like literally, if you are just a great switching defense, that significantly diminishes Trae's value on its own. And there are just more really good switching defenses than there were even 5 years ago. Like, this evolution is constantly progressing. Trae Young has not progressed at all as a basketball player. And I do think the defensive stuff with him has become even more damaging. And I also think, again, teams are less dependent on one player just purely raising their offensive floor now. And that's not to say that great offensive guards don't still have offensive value. Even if you look at this year, it's a small sample size. But if you look at last year, especially, like, the Hawks offense has still been significantly better with Trae on the floor. He does still have that value. But it's not the same thing that it was a handful of years ago. Again, where 2022, it's like, okay, this guy is going to propel us to be the number 2 offense in the NBA, and we don't really have any other significant ball handlers alongside him. Trae's not doing that for a team. Ja, I agree with you. I've always been lower on because I think he's just fundamentally a more flawed offensive half-court player. But it is ultimately the same kind of story that we're looking at here with both these guys. I don't think it's Trae getting worse. I think Ja actually has gotten worse because he's not getting to the rim as much, and that was always his sort of supreme value. Trae, I think, is the exact same player. I just think the league has gotten better in ways that are particularly problematic for him. And listen, maybe there's a path to him improving offensively on the margins. Like this year, he actually was getting off the ball a little bit more, and he was keeping turnovers lower. I don't know if he can sustain that, but like, are those marginal offensive changes going to be the things that move where the league is at with Trae Young, that really move his ability to be an impactful player on a great team, on a massive contract? I don't think so. I think this is like kind of the end of the line, man. Because I don't know, I'm even looking at the Wizards and I'm like, they're taking on Trae Young because they're able to do it while giving up no assets, because they're in this spot where it's like, we have some young pieces who we like, but we don't have any sort of like foundational half-court offensive creator at this point. Why not take Trae on, considering we don't care about the cap commitment at all and we're not giving up any assets? And I think the assumption is obviously that they're going to extend him, because that's what you think whenever you trade for a player like this. But there is a lingering thought in the back of my mind that, what if they do just want him for a year and a half? What if they're like, for now, we want you to be the pick and roll partner for an Alex Sarr. For now, we want you to be that stabilizing force for us in the half court, because we think that maybe Keyshawn George and Trey Johnson, they'll be those sort of guys in the aggregate for us down the line. But right now, we just want a legit half court ball handler, elite playmaker like a Trae Young to sort of elevate the guys around him, the young guys at this stage in their development. But after that, we're not interested in the Trae Young business. We only want him now when it is at zero cost to us in terms of our assets, when it is at really no cost to our players in terms of their development, because we think they're at the stage where they more so need a guy like him, as opposed to in a couple years, we want them to be the guys running the show, and they don't care about the cap commitment. Like, I don't think it's impossible that the Wizards are not intending to extend Trae Young on a max after this. I don't know what they're thinking, but like, if I were them, I would at least want to be like, all right, let's see how this goes. Let's see how we feel about this. I'm not signing anything today on January 8th. That's for sure.
Dude, you took the words out of my mouth. I literally wrote down, why not make this trade? That was the first thing that I wrote down for Washington on this. It is a risk-free deal. And technically, by transitive property, they have now flipped somehow, some way, Bradley Beal into Trae Young. If you follow the breadcrumbs, you go from Beal to CP3, you flip CP3 into Jordan Poole, you flip Poole into McCollum, and somehow, some way, the Wizards have landed Trae Young. Like, talk about like failing upwards, man. Like, I cannot believe that they somehow landed him after all that. And obviously, you know, you add in Kispert to the deal, but I don't think you're losing sleep over losing Kispert. I mean, at the best, you're buying low on a potentially valuable long-term asset for your young franchise, and at the worst, you're handcuffed to a $50 million contract for the next 2 seasons, and then, like you said, you just let him walk in free agency. So I think it's a really great deal for Washington. And I'll say these numbers because these are the damning numbers on Trae to tie a bow on this. You're talking about the catch and shoot. Dude, it's funny. I looked through all the years of Trae's career. You want to take a guess at the most catch and shoot attempts he's had per game in a single season in his career?
From 3, I'm going to say 2.5.
2.1. It's a great guess. I was
going to say 2 flat, damn.
It's hilarious. He is number 1 in career turnovers per game at 4.2, and this season he's shooting 34% on pull-ups. And as you mentioned earlier, The Hawks were 15 points better defensively with Trae off the floor, which is literally the worst number I've ever seen.
Yeah, and again, we have to keep in mind sample size there
yes,
with the number
course.
being that ridiculous, and again, the fact that they just were not playing serious defense with or without him. But let's largen the sample size a little bit. Let's look at the last 3 years. That defensive on-off is still going to be very gnarly for one Trae Young. Yeah, they're 5 points worse with him on the floor defensively. They have a 120 defensive rating overall, which is really bad.
Yeah, all that being said, though, you can't forget the offensive engine that Trae is. Over the last 6 seasons, Trae has averaged 27 points per game, 10 assists per game with 8 free throw attempts per night. We're talking about this baked-in offensive floor that comes with, average Trae, because Trae hasn't been himself this year. Like, it has just been the worst season of his career in totality. But over the last 6 years, I mean, he has been one of the best offensive engines in the league. In Atlanta, with a decent sample size, they've been 6 points better offensively with Trae on the floor. And I mentioned the career turnovers per game number. Trae's also third in career assists per game at 9.8, just behind John Stockton and Magic Johnson. And so when I look at this for Washington, like you said, man, why not do it? Washington needs a young star to build around. I think he brings some excitement to the Wizards. Like, this has been a fan base that has been toiling in mediocrity since they lost John Wall and Brad Beal. Like, I don't know, man. I think it brings a little bit of life to this franchise, and I think he'll be a great compliment to Sarr. He was one of the big reasons I wanted Atlanta to draft Sarr in the first place. And you mentioned, man, with so many young players around, let's see what happens. I just think this is such a low-risk value deal for Washington. I give them like a A, man. I think for a team like them, I don't really see a big downside.
And I do want to be clear. This year was damning for Trae, and this year has just been kind of a continuation of this damning stretch for, again, players in his archetype with overwhelmingly similar flaws and strengths to him, and there's a few guys like that in the NBA. But that is not to say that Trae Young is not talented, and if you were to cast Trae into a new situation, this is kind of the spot you'd want him to go, and it's the spot he wanted to go, and I wonder if part of that is maybe self-awareness, or maybe he knew that they wanted him, because it's no coincidence, for all the reasons that we laid out when we were having our negative Trae Young fest, that it wasn't a contender that said, let's make the move for Trae. It wasn't a fringe playoff team. Nobody is looking around the league and being like, Trae is the sort of player who we can slot in, and he's going to elevate us from good to great. He's going to be the difference-making move right now, again, at this $50 million value, which is going to require us giving up assets, and that's going to be the reason we become a great team. That was not the market for Trae, and that's why when we were discussing these trade rumors, I was like, first of all, wait a bit, just to see if maybe you can salvage the situation, but also, what's the urgency when you're going to get a shitty return? And the reality is they just wanted to be done with Trae, Atlanta, and they were willing to take this shitty return. But this is very telling about the market, not just because the return is so underwhelming, although it does make sense, but also because of the team that was willing to give it up, the team that has been the worst in the NBA, the team that has been a bottom-tier offense. But I also think that's the sort of situation that Trae Young is built to help. And again, as we talk about the negatives, last year, I thought Trae did such an impressive job of raising the floor of that Atlanta offense, a team that did not have the version of Jaylen Johnson that they've had this year, and also Jaylen Johnson didn't play for more of half of last year. He was injured. They didn't have Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, they had very subpar spacing, lots of questionable shooting around him. They had really no other legitimate ball handlers. Once Jaylen Johnson got hurt, Trae was still able to make them a good offense, a plus offense, a team with a 117 plus offensive rating when he was on the floor. So that is the significance of what Trae Young can do for a basketball team. That's what Washington needs right now. Like, they can put the ball in his hands for a majority of the game, and he can take them from the number 27 offense to a more average offense. And I don't know if it's an interest in them being competitive, if that's like the impetus here, if they're like, okay, we've had enough of being historically bad for 3 years. We want to actually do something, and they've won like 5 of their last 10 games, and now they're feeling a little bit froggy. I don't know if that's the expectation. I've seen some Wizards fans who are angling for like, ooh, we're not that far out of the play-in. We all know being in the East play and sneaking into the 10 seed in the East is totally meaningless. And by the way, I still don't think the Wizards would be good enough to do that. I think it is more so about let's pair Alex Sarr with a great pick and roll playmaker and see how he looks and see what sort of play finishing effectiveness he can bring in that setting. And I think he's going to look really good. I think Alex Sarr has already had a really good year, but like you said, Trae is sort of a great player to pair with a guy like that, and maybe just put it in this spot where as a team, the Wizards don't feel miserable. And especially because a guy like Trae Johnson, right, I think is somebody with a great off-ball scoring skill set. That's part of his game. So when you put a primary ball handler like Trae into an offense like that without other established high-level offensive players who maybe his rigidity conflicts with, I think it works overall. Again, would I want to commit after this 5 years, $300 million to Trae Young? I would not be inclined to do that. And I'm interested to see if there actually is a market recalibration on Trae, on a Ja Morant, whatever, not just in terms of trade value, but in terms of the actual contract, because we live in this world where anybody who puts up star numbers in the NBA gets the max, whatever their max can be. But Trae, even though he can give you, again, 25 and 10, and he can elevate your team offense to some extent as a floor raiser, with all of the drawbacks, what if that's actually worth more like $30 million of value? Because if we're talking about Trae as a $30 million player, I think the entire picture is different as opposed to if he's a $50 million player. So even though he obviously requires that you play a certain way offensively, if you're not committing so much of your cap to him, then you have the ability to put an even more kick-ass defensive team around him. You can just find more talent elsewhere. So I'm very interested in seeing how this all pans out in terms of what Washington is looking to do with Trae long term. But for the short term, like you said, why the hell not? I mean, it's at no cost to them, and he's still a good basketball player. He's still talented, and he is going to certainly make this team's offense better right now. But also, maybe they should just be trying to get the number 1 overall pick again, and maybe this takes them just out of those conversations.
I don't know, man. The lottery's such a shit show. I don't even really focus on it.
It is, and they've gotten screwed by it.
Yeah, that's why, like, I'll talk, because I have a lot of friends that are Washington fans, and they'll be like, they said the exact same thing, and I'm like, well, you guys have bottomed out, how many years, and then you end up with the 6th fucking pick anyway, so it's like, I wouldn't even, Adam Silver picks and chooses who's going to get the number 1 pick anyway, man, so it's no use.
And he never picks the Wizards.
He hates them.
That's too bad. Yeah, I mean, obviously this draft class is insane, but I still think you're right. Maybe the Wizards are due for their luck where they actually finish with the 6th worst record this year, but they get the number 1 overall pick because they've been getting the inverse of that the last couple years, even though they've still gotten talents who I like in these recent drafts. I mean, obviously they've had a couple misses, but they've also had a couple hits.
With the current construction of Washington's roster, I don't really think Trae impedes any of the development with any of these young players for them. Like with Atlanta, Jaylen Johnson, right, in a dub, they're having career years with the ball in their hands. I can understand their frustrations. Like with Washington, maybe it's like Keyshawn George, but it's like Keyshawn George isn't going to, have all of his touches eradicated anyway. Like he's still going to have the ball in his hands a decent amount, and I kind of tend to think that he had the ball in his hands a little bit too much for a young player. I mean, I guess they're not really trying to win games, so that's not super important. But it's like Trae Johnson's still a good off-ball scoring weapon. He's going to be efficient when he gets a rock in his hands. Sarr isn't a guy that you're running offense through on the perimeter, right? He's still more of a low-block guy. So, like, I don't really look at this team and go, wow, Trae's stonewalling this guy from getting better. That would have been a hang-up, if I had a guy that I was really banking on. But I don't really see that kind of creator on Washington at this point in time.
Yeah, I think Keyshawn is the guy who is like that actual pick-and-roll ball handler for them. But like you said, even he has a more balanced on- and off-ball game. Trae, I think, has a really nicely balanced on- and off-ball game. Like, I think he's at his most lethal, honestly, playing off screens as like a movement shooter. And then Sarr, like he's a guy you're going to give the ball to initiate himself in spots, but he is mostly like a play finishing big, even if often that is as a popper from the perimeter. So I agree. He's not really stepping on toes, and so for Washington, I like it as a buy low move. How about for the Hawks? What does this open up for them that Trae was inhibiting them from doing where they wanted to get off him so badly?
Just playing team basketball.
Real.
Yeah, I think it's obviously we can talk about the numbers and what Trae was doing when he was on the court and off like we did, but again, I think there's a just major psychological and human boost. Like I just think Atlanta
Ding dong, the Wicked Witch is dead.
Yeah, I think
where
it's an
they're at with Trae.
organizational thing. I think it's just going to be like addition by subtraction. Kispert's a guy that's going to be able to come in here and give them good off-ball minutes and spot-up shooting along with their other wings, right? Like, McCollum will be a serviceable player that's not stepping on toes. Like, who knows? I think he'll crack the rotation and give him a solid, 20 a night or something like that. But I just think it's going to allow Atlanta to play team basketball. I don't think this boosts them. I still think there is a very hard ceiling on what Atlanta
100%.
can achieve this year down Trae Young. But what this does is because McCollum isn't expiring, it just gives them, and KP isn't expiring, it gives them ample cap space and flexibility in the next 2 years. And I think that's just what Atlanta values more, having the ability to potentially absorb another star's contract with cap space, the ability to just go out in free agency and bankroll somebody and add them to their team. I just think they like the added flexibility. And like we've been talking about, I just think Atlanta's better without Trae. And so it's sad. I mean, it's sad that this is the kind of return that you're going to get for a guy like Trae, whose value, you would have said a couple of years ago was that of a star's. But I just think Atlanta is changing course. I still think they're a playoff team, but there's a few pretty glaring roster weaknesses, in my opinion, that keep them from really doing damage this year. The KP injury, I think, has been completely debilitating for Atlanta. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Jaylen Johnson, KP, and Trae shared the floor for just 48 minutes this year, which is so heartbreaking because, like you said, in preseason, theoretically, we thought Atlanta could maybe be a fringe contender or a team that could contend, go to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Buying all the stock, man.
And Trae wasn't good. KP was never healthy. And it really just never materialized. So it's disappointing that doesn't come to fruition. Center is probably still – center and the offensive number one are still my biggest hang-ups about this team. I think they need another legitimate rim protector. And, I like Onyeka, but Onyeka's just a little bit too small, in my opinion, to truly transform and anchor a defense. I think they need a real defensive-minded big man who can anchor a defense. And then I think they need that offensive number one. But who knows? Maybe Jaylen Johnson can fully just develop and transform into that guy. Mm-hmm. He was posting routine 30-point, 40-point triple-doubles when he was the number one. I think you see some of the Hawks
40-point triple-doubles. Let's pump the brakes a little bit.
He was balling.
He's putting up big numbers, yeah.
I think you see some of the Hawks late game, scoring limitations. That was one of the things without Trae, their offense would just stall out for long periods of time. So I still think they need a guy like that, but not a guy that is a caricature like Trae that just inhibits everybody else around him. So I still think there are some core guys that Atlanta needs to add to actually go on a run, but the foundation is solid. They can have a ton of cap space and flexibility for the next couple of years. And, I think they are now – there's just more flexibility for them to make a big-time move and to actually leap into contention. And now their timeline is just different. They're younger, and, it's a new timeline for them. I think – it's a hard pill to swallow, but I think it was the right decision for Atlanta.
100%. And even getting CJ back, although he's obviously going to be gone after this year, for this season, him being something of a surrogate ball handler for them, obviously he is not nearly the playmaker that Trae is, and he's not going to have that sort of on-ball volume. But just in terms of being a legit ball handling guard and being able to cut through with actual pull-up shooting, he's still one of the best pull-up shooters in basketball. And he's still one of the most efficient volume pick-and-roll scorers in basketball. So to get him back as this matching salary throw-in, essentially, in terms of the Hawks remaining competitive this year, I do like that. He is obviously not going to solve their half-court offensive problems, but they need more creation than just Jaylen and Nah, and shout out Vit Krejci in his minutes, but they need a third guy who is at least a clear plus offensive player as a ball handler for them. CJ is that. I really think the biggest thing that Atlanta has to get together right now is the defensive side of the ball, because this started to crumble before Trae came back. It's remained an issue. Regardless of if Trae's on the floor as of late, this was a team that was defending their asses off for the first dozen games after Trae got hurt, and that was a huge part of them winning a lot of games. Last 15 games, they're 24th in defensive rating. So with their personnel, that just shouldn't be the case. They're too athletic. They have too much length. They need to buy in there. And offensively, I agree with you. the lack of a true half-court creator, even though Jaylen Johnson, his development has been so impressive, and he's so versatile and such a good playmaker and just awesome for his size and continues to trend up and up. A guy who can really sort of work in like some of those slowed down, congested environments and reliably make plays for others in the half court. They don't have that. And so that's going to hold them back. But I don't think they're thinking about how do we be the best version of ourselves this year. I don't think that that's priority number one. If that were, maybe they would have held out to see, okay, if Trae gets healthy, can we make things work? But they didn't even wait around to do that because I think they had seen enough to say, all right, we care much more about the long-term vision of our team, and we just want to be done with Trae, and we want to shift to this new era. And also, the other thing is, they very well might not be done this year because there's been a lot of talk about how this was the move to give them the opportunity to make another move. There is a lot of talk about the Hawks being interested in Anthony Davis, which confuses me a bit. Obviously, they would have to give up KP in that deal. I think that KP is clearly just a negative asset, even though before he got sick, his last 3 games since he came back have been really rough. He was playing really well when he was on the court. KP is still a really good basketball player when he is not being crippled by illness or injury, but nobody is going to believe that he's going to be able to hold up. So you throw him in. There's been all of the Sesh trade rumors. You put him in there, and then like a pick and salary filler. I don't know if that gets you into serious conversations with the Mavs, but
dude, I think
Dallas could.
I think Dallas fans are rioting again. What the fuck?
Well, dude,
do
they want Anthony Davis?
Dude, I'm sorry, bro. It's like
it's not a
we
great
dealt
return when you
Luka for AD, and then
Luka
we flipped
Doncic
AD for Porzingis, bro.
Well, no, it's not Porzingis. It's not Porzingis. It's Sesh and a pick, which, it's still not good.
I'm never watching the fucking Mavericks. Dude, I'm quitting if I was a Mavs fan, I'm quitting my fandom on sight, bruh.
Yeah, it doesn't seem super probable to me because of that. And also, like, there's no world in which the Hawks are giving up that Pelicans pick this year. They'd have to be as dumb as the Pelicans were to give them that pick in the first place, to give that up for AD. And also, I just don't love it for the Hawks. I'm like, at 32 years old, is Anthony Davis at like $60 million a year for the next 2.5 years, the move that you want to make, when really what you do need more so is like that awesome playmaking guard who's just a much better, less flawed player than a Trae Young. Like, I don't think that they really need a big like AD when several of their other good offensive players like Jaylen Johnson and Nickeil Alexander-Walker are already like mostly trying to play downhill as drivers, and AD can flirt with floor spacing, but we obviously know that he's most effective as an interior offensive player. I just don't really like the fit in terms of the basketball or the timeline, and I'm not in a spot where like the Hawks need to make that move that's going to make them a contender. I like a lot of what they have, but I just don't think that AD is going to do enough for them to justify kind of what they'd have to give up, what they'd have to commit to him in terms of cap. I'd rather just be pivoting towards this timeline of, hey, we've got Jaylen Johnson right now, who is a flat-out star, just turned 24 years old. We are going to pick very high in one of the most stacked draft classes in NBA history coming up. And we talked about this recently too, but if they get a Darren Peterson, a guy who is a lead creator for you, but also somebody who is valuable off ball, and also somebody who can actually compete defensively, the big, hyper-skilled athletic guard that is balanced, that everybody in the NBA wants, you get that guy, and now you do have one of the brightest futures in the NBA. So I wouldn't be rushing to pull the trigger. I would just be like, hey, let's empower our guys who we believe in here. Let's buy in again defensively. Let's compete. Trae is gone. Hooray. And let's try to be a respectable playoff team this year, with ultimately our eyes more so on the future and this timeline that is coming up. Crazy ordeal all around, though, man. How quickly this Trae Young narrative escalated. Kind of a storybook ending to this whole dynamic we've been talking about all year. The fact that it all happened like this, we've been saying, okay, where's the line with a small guard like Trae Young? And then they said, here's the line. He's not on the right side of it. Bye-bye Trae from Atlanta. Washington is willing to take him on at a very low risk. Makes sense. But RIP to the vision I had for the Hawks, man. I do have to take a moment to say the 50-win Hawks that I envisioned, it was not to be. And so RIP to that. Speaking of RIP, Logan, RIP to the Oklahoma City Thunder setting the wins record this year. Some of the things we were talking about just a month ago This is a team that started 24-1. They're 7-6 since then. What is wrong with the Oklahoma City Thunder right now?
It's basically just their offense, man. I mean, a lot of people, and I don't blame them, have been just putting this solely on Jalen Williams' shoulders because he came back, and that's basically when this dip coincided that the Thunder fell apart. I think J-Dub has not been good. He's only giving you 17, 5, and 6 on 53.6% true shooting. He's shooting 46% from the field and 30% from deep. They've actually been 8.7 points better without Dub on the floor, 4 offensively, 4.5 defensively. But I think it is just a basically total catastrophic offensive failure of a lot of players outside of SGA when SGA is not on the floor. And just their shooting. I mean, it's basically just the offense. Like, since Dub came back, the Thunder haven't been as dominant as a defense they were in the early stretch, but they've still been the best defense in basketball. They are a whopping 11 points worse, nearly 11 points worse offensively without SGA on the floor.
Yeah.
And over this stretch since Dub came back, these 4 guys, I'm going to zero in on them. Kaysen, Caruso, Wiggins, and Dort. Those 4 guys combined are giving you 15 threes a night at under a 34% clip. Like, the shooting has been abysmal from the supporting cast, and it worries me, Carson. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's so strange because, like, progression isn't always linear, and it's not always direct. And so sometimes you can kind of fill in these blanks with some of these young players with OKC. Like 2 years ago when these struggles came in offensively in the playoffs, they got a little bit better last year and they won the championship. And so mentally, I'm expecting just straight progression. Everybody's going to get a little bit better. They're going to shoot a little bit better. Everybody's going to be just a tiny bit better offensively. And it just hasn't materialized that way. And so I'm kind of sitting here panicking, wondering, does OKC need to make a deal? And I suggested this. I floated this idea with Dort. I still think Dort is the odd man out not that long ago. Caruso's been pretty bad. I still think Caruso's the better defender, so I would be more inclined to keep him around for the playoffs. And Dort's money, I feel like, would allow you to make a bigger swing at a more impactful offensive player.
Well, the money's almost identical.
Oh, it's similar.
Yeah.
I still think OKC has enough talent in-house, and they're still good enough defensively to go on a run, and they've got the guys, but I wonder if they need to go out and get one more ball handler, creator, scorer, another guy that you can reliably put the ball in their hands. Like, I think Dub's going to be better. I think they need to play A.J. Mitchell more. That's one of my big takeaways. Like, I can't believe that A.J. Mitchell is getting less. He is so solid, so dependable. Just play him more. Give him 28 to 30 minutes a night, man. You should be playing him, in my opinion. It should go right now with how guys are playing. I would go SGA gets the most minutes, Chet gets the second most, then AJ's getting the third most burn. I just think he's one of the most dependable guys on this roster. And then I look, is it dire enough that by the deadline in a month, should OKC make a deal? I am on the fence of yes, they should make a deal. They should find another offensive contributor that's reliable. Like, again, I think some of these things are going to balance out. I think some of these guys shoot a little bit better. I think the defense is as dependable as anything else is in basketball, and I feel the same way about SGA. He's a monster. But the offense is leaving a little bit to be desired, and I am at the point where I think they need to make a deal, because if they don't, I think they are very, very vulnerable to being defeated in the playoffs, and I didn't feel that way a month ago.
This has to start with accountability, Logan. I'm going to say this right now. I cursed the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I'm very sorry about it. They were 24-1. They were off to the best start in NBA history through 25 games, and I made a video where I talked about all of these wonderful things, and I said this team is absolutely on track to be one of the all-time greats this year, and it feels like they are effectively unbeatable right now. I literally said I'll be shocked next time they lose a game, and then they lost their next game, and ever since then, they just haven't been nearly the same basketball team. So that's on me. That's on me. I want to eat that up front. In this stretch where they are only 7-6, they're third in defensive rating, which is obviously not as good as best relative defensive rating in NBA history, like 7 points better in defensive rating than the number 2 defense in the NBA, which is the level they'd been at before then. Still, pretty damn good defensively, though. But 17th in offensive rating. Like you said, that's where the issues are really happening for this team right now. And that's honestly where the issues are always going to pop up for the Thunder when they do. And that's kind of the first thing to say here. We can act like the sky is falling, and I certainly did not anticipate OKC having this ugly stretch. But there are no new problems that we're seeing here. These are the same things that have always popped up for OKC when it's looked ugly, the things that they've been able to overcome, win 68 games last year, win the title last year. That's not to excuse it. That's not to write it off. And that's not to say that it doesn't make them more mortal than I thought they were a month ago, because frankly, I thought they had improved more offensively than they actually have. But I do just want to lay out that foundation. I do think there are several things happening here, though, beyond just some of the same recurring offensive problems that are more of the long-term concern, specifically in this stretch. Number one is the Spurs are a true matchup problem for them. So we can look at these last two losses and say, okay, what the hell is happening to OKC? And fairly and rightly so. But 3 of these losses are to San Antonio, who for a bunch of unique reasons on both sides of the floor that we don't fully need to get into right now. I talked about some of them at length in the recent video I made about Wemby. That's not a one-off, because a lot of what they do is expose the Thunder's offensive issues with their scheme and with having a Wemby. And also, they're able to kind of limit the Thunder's defensive superpowers, or they have been, at least in the last couple games, with these guards who can actually break through and still create dribble penetration and not turn the ball over a lot. But that I kind of view separately from these other losses. Another thing that I think is just the reality with this team is they haven't had their same urgency and energy in this stretch. Now, that happens in a regular season. Everybody goes through these lulls and dips, and most of the great teams we've seen in this league in recent years have had their underwhelming stretches. That's not to excuse it. And specifically, I thought OKC was kind of immune to this. I thought they were the team that is going to play with 100% of their energy every single night. I've talked about them having the highest regular season floor in NBA history, in large part because of that and because of how inevitable their defensive greatness is. And that just hasn't been the same wire to wire in these recent weeks. And that's why I think the defense, although it's still been very good, has not been as historically great as it is when they are going full throttle. The other thing, as you mentioned, really bad shooting luck and really bad shooting overall. They're 28th in three-point percentage in this stretch. They are 29% from three in their 6 losses in this stretch. Obviously, shooting variance is always going to get you in the NBA. If you are getting significantly outshot from beyond the arc, that's going to be the biggest indicator of you losing basketball games in 2026. Ironically, even the Thunder had been able to overcome that before this stretch, but as they have faced better teams, and as some of their spot-up shooting issues have been like specifically super detrimental, not just because they're missing threes, but because of how much opposing teams are loading up on Shea, because of how opposing teams are playing them in a way that specifically requires they make those spot-up threes as a huge part of their offense. When they've got iffy shooters missing shots, again, that's when things can go south for this Thunder offense. And then on the other side, opponents are also shooting the ball really well from deep, unusually well, over 38% in that stretch, which is the 4th highest. So if you're shooting the ball horribly from deep, your opponents are shooting the ball really well, that's going to lead to some of these issues too. I think about specifically the Hornets game, which is obviously by far the craziest of these losses, because you lose a heartbreaker to the Suns, that's one thing. You lose to the Spurs, who have been great, that's one thing. You get beat up by the Hornets, that's a shock. Rewatching that game, it's like one of the ultimate magnet ball games of the season, and especially as the Thunder are shooting very poorly from deep in their own right. But dude, LaMelo, Brandon Miller, and Kahn combined to go 16 of 24 from three. Some of the shots LaMelo specifically hit in that game, the shot he caught the ball as he was leaning deep in the corner, like behind the basket, shot clock expiring, throws it up, and it goes in. And, you know, he's doing his classic crazy LaMelo, like one-footed shot making shit. It was just really the extreme version of bad shooting luck in that game. So those couple concerns, the energy not being quite the same, the shooting luck going against them, that stuff will work itself out. Another thing that big picture will work itself out is that they're 28th in rebound percentage in this skid. And with Hartenstein out, they have been getting owned on the glass. The Jazz, who just took them to overtime in a game that they won only because of like a miraculously great Shea performance, and he had did a game-tying shot in regulation and score 46. That's a really bad performance for OKC. But Utah was plus 14 on the boards. The Hornets were plus 19. The Suns were plus 20. So the Thunder normally have this supreme ability to generate way more possessions for themselves because of how many turnovers they force, how they never turn the ball over, and then they're at least respectable on the glass. Without Hartenstein, they're a really bad rebounding team. When he's back, obviously that changes, but he's been so impactful on the offensive glass. When he's on the floor, they grab 29% of their own misses. When he's not, they grab 19%, which is like the worst offensive rebounding team in NBA history. Obviously, they just play super small, and Chet is not a good offensive rebounding five whatsoever, but that's been a problem for them. All of that to say, all these things are coming together right now to create kind of the perfect storm for how this team that looked unbeatable has suddenly been playing basically 500 basketball for the last several weeks. Number 5, though, as I go through these concerns, is the actual issue to me. And that's how the half-court offense has looked, as you mentioned. I do always feel the need to remind people when we talk about these issues, OKC is a 93rd percentile half-court offense. They were better than a 90th percentile half-court offense in the regular season last year. They have these lulls, but oftentimes people paint it as kind of like, oh, if you can just keep them in the half-court, they're average. And that's just not true. They're still an elite half-court offense, but they are extraordinarily dependent on one player for that elite half-court offense. I don't think it's out of line to say the Thunder might be more dependent on Shea for their offense than any other team is on one player. And there's conversations there. Giannis with the Bucks is the first guy who comes to mind. You could argue Jokic with the Nuggets, of course, but with how Jamal is playing right now, I don't know. But
yeah,
it's that top tier. And that's the point that I think always has to be made when we talk about why Shea is so special. People say, oh, it's a super team. It's a defensive super team. Offensively, it is the Shea Gilgeous-Alexander show. So when he is seeing the coverages that he's seeing right now, with streaky spot-up shooting around him, and with a currently very inconsistent second ball handler in J-Dub who's struggling like he is, teams load up on him with aggressive gap help. He sees multiple bodies all game long on every drive, and that means because there aren't other ball handlers here who can break down a defense in their own right, and because there aren't vertical spacers and above the rim athletes here, right? Chet is a guy who, he'll catch a few lobs. He's capable of doing that, but he is not somebody who usually sits in the dunker spot and is there as kind of just a release valve as a vertical spacer. And other than him on this roster, the Thunder have built this like incredible defensive team by having a shit ton of guards and wings who are all crazy physical and fast, and they can switch and guard up, and like defensively it's perfect, but offensively they are lacking those sort of like, again, big play finishing athletes at the basket. And because those guys also aren't really good ball handlers, their roles offensively is basically sit in the corner, sit on the wings, knock down, catch and shoot threes, right? Some of them have solid cutting feel, but they're still below the rim guards. So the offense basically becomes Shea mid-range looks because he's seeing this crazy help and he's incredible at still driving in congested situations. But when the paint is truly packed, he becomes more reliant on the mid-range game and spot up threes for the guys around him. And those reads are always there. Those passes are available. He makes those reads. He makes those passes. But if those guys are missing spot-up jumpers, as they have been in these losses, and if Shea is not cash money from mid-range, like if he is not exceptional, which he usually is, but for the most part in their losses, he hasn't been, that's how this team becomes vulnerable. Shea in their wins has given you 33 points per game on 70% true shooting, making a strong case for the greatest guard scoring season ever in the wins, which make up obviously a vast majority of the games for them. But in the losses, 29 points per game, 55% true shooting. And so as you can force him into a more jump shot heavy diet, and we saw this most pronounced in the Spurs game, but we have seen it in most of these losses, if he's not on, then they're going to run into something of a wall. And the other problem is their offense is just bad when he's off the floor. As you mentioned, it's 11-point drop-off when Shea doesn't play.
I don't know about you. I think it gives teams a recipe kind of a la how Dallas did 2 years ago in the playoffs to game plan against them and I'm not saying like make them a horrible offense, but to play the worst, play like the worst version of themselves.
100%, but I don't think it gives them a game plan. I think this has always been the game plan. And I just think we're seeing teams execute it right now. The Spurs have a unique game plan because they can say, okay, we're not just packing the paint. We have a 7'4" all-time great rim protector and deterrent with an 8-foot wingspan, and he's going to roam off of whoever's in the corner so he can be the low man all game. Wemby can destroy shit in a unique way. Other than that, I think everybody has known essentially what they want to do. We saw Denver play their zone, right? But the idea is basically crowd the elbows, pack the paint, aggressive in gaps, and make Shea beat you with over-the-top shot making and make these spot-up shooters beat you. So I think teams know that. You're absolutely right. It is the formula. I just don't think, again, this is some revelation. This is just kind of worst-case scenario for OKC because they really don't have offensive variety, especially when J-Dub is playing like this. And it's just been tough to watch, man. Ever since he came back, it's been tough to watch. His half-court shot diet is just brutal right now. He's really not getting by people off the dribble, and he's always had this tendency to settle a lot, to fall in love with the mid-range, but his three-point rate is even way down, so he's not getting some of those higher value jump shots, and he's shooting really badly on them, 30% from deep. And the mid-range game that he loves so much, 37% for mid-range. That's like an 8% drop-off from last year. 40% in the paint non-restricted area, those short jumpers and runners. Like, he's been bad on those, way worse than last year. So I do think J-Dub is an up-and-down offensive player. Always has been, maybe always will be. We'll see. And so very much the Thunder can kind of go with him offensively. He's such an important player for them. He's not a reliable offensive second creator in the half court, but also he's obviously better than he's been showing. And when he played his best basketball in the playoffs last year and overall last year, that's when the Thunder felt like this unbeatable team. So they just need a much better version of him. And I do think this is where AJ Mitchell is utterly essential for this team, and I couldn't agree with you more. I've said this several times. He's been a better offensive player than J-Dub this year, just like flat out. And he does have an ability with his shiftiness to actually break down a defense in a way that J-Dub, who is easier to contain, in my opinion, and to force into more of those tough shots, he doesn't do that same thing. So when Shea and AJ have played together, the Thunder offense has been exceptional. They have a 126 offensive rating in those minutes. I think they should be leaning in to more of that because AJ can play off the ball. He can knock down the catch and shoot jumpers off of Shea, but he can also be an actual other ball handler and creator that they so desperately need. So they have all these issues in the half court right now, and those things are more significant when teams are able to keep them out of transition, which is also happening right now. Because, although, as again, I emphasized earlier, the Thunder are a great half-court basketball team, what really sets them apart is their dominance in the possession game and their dominance in the transition battle, where they keep you out of transition better than anybody else, and they get out in transition a ton. And specifically, they score off of opponent turnovers more than anybody we've ever seen in the era in which we've had those stats recorded. Over their last 6 losses, they have just 15.5 transition points per game. For context, they average 25.5 transition points per game across all their other games this season. So you're losing 10 points per game of margin that you're normally creating from the other team. That's going to put more pressure on your half-court offense, and that's just going to make it harder to win games with the formula they usually execute. And part of this is if you can keep them from generating a lot of live ball turnovers, which is much easier said than done, but the Spurs were able to do it. The Suns were able to do it. I mean, they only had 2 steals versus Phoenix. They had 7 steals in one game versus San Antonio, 5 steals in another versus San Antonio. That is going to, again, limit their ability to turn defense into offense, which it's when they get that going that it's like, all right, how the hell do we keep up with this team? So, like I said, everything that possibly could come together, like literally, I would say, has come together to lead to the Thunder losing these games. But I did feel like this team had leveled up from last year. Again, it's not that we're seeing any new problems. They did everything they did last year in 168 games and the title with all of these offensive problems, not just existing, but specifically showing up in their title run. And they were still able to create enough margin and overcome it in the big moments to win it all. But because Shea has been better this year and Chet's been better, and now they have AJ Mitchell, I just thought like it was going to be a more meaningful difference this year compared to last year. That's how it did look until this recent stretch. Clearly, though, as great as they are, and I'm not hitting the panic button with this team, and I still think they're your clear title favorite because of their formula, an all-time great defense, like arguably the best we've seen since the 60 Celtics, and an all-time great offensive player, which Shea still is, like, and their dominance in the possession game and transition, all these things. That's why the Thunder are still 31-7 with a top 3 net rating in NBA history. And just because they aren't playing nearly as well doesn't mean they aren't still the best team, but they are flawed. And like we've been saying, a month ago, I thought, yeah, they're almost invincible. Like, I could maybe see Denver beating them if Jokic has an amazing series. And now it's like, okay, San Antonio is a really tough matchup for them, and Denver is in that mix. And we've just seen the cracks in the armor come up again.
So if I had to pin you down for a percentage or
please
something,
do.
what would you say? Like, where were you at, let's say, a month ago, and where would you say you're at now with, like, OKC and their chances at, what should I say, to win the West or to win the title? Are those the same? Are those different?
They're pretty much the same. I'll say to win the title, they'd still be an odds-on favorite for me. I still say it's above 50%. If you asked me a month ago, I would have said it was 85%. I mean, I thought they were truly on the trajectory to be like one of the most dominant teams end-to-end that we've ever seen. I do want to reiterate, I mean, they're still on pace for, 67 wins, and again, a top 3 net rating ever. It hasn't felt that way recently, but yeah, I still think, for all the reasons I've talked about so many times over, all the reasons that they did win it all last year and they were such a great regular season team last year, their formula is just most reliable. They can break any opposing offense. They usually create this 10, 15 point per game margin because of the transition and turnover dominance. And Shea this year is averaging 32 points per game on plus 9% relative true shooting as a guard who turns the ball over less than anybody we've ever seen scoring at this volume. And I do think is a better playmaker and like is so overwhelmingly consistent. There's still no formula that I could take over that.
I agree. Considering this recent stretch, though, do you think they need to make a move at the deadline? Would you explore that?
Do I think they need to? No. I think they can stand pat, and again, they'd still be the odds-on title favorite for me. But could they stand to do it? Yeah, this is where I was at last year, right? I wasn't saying, oh, they need to do it. But if they can go out there and get a Cam Johnson, that takes them from title favorite to really heavy title favorite. And this year, I would feel that way, but even a little bit more so, because I do think they're a better team than last year, because I do think A.J. Mitchell is a revelation and a difference maker. And I do think that Chet is better. Chet just needs to find a way to get his offense against elite defenses, and that's going to be the next step for him, because he is limited there, especially the Spurs. Wemby is such a problem for him, and when you can put feisty wings on him who he struggles to handle against, and then you've got Wemby and help, like, you can limit him. But really, I feel like J-Dub playing significantly better, as we know he should, because he is ultimately a significantly better basketball player than this, and this team shooting decently well, not really badly from deep. Again, not to say they're an elite shooting team, because they just aren't at this point. I think we have to accept that. This team goes through lulls in terms of their spot-up shooting, but with those things looking like they normally do, I think OKC clearly stands above the rest of the league still. But if you were going to say, okay, can they package Lou Dort and whatever contract, Ousmane Dieng on an expiring, and a couple picks to go out there and get Trey Murphy, like, yeah, I would love that for them. I would love for them to have an actual elite, reliable three-point shooting weapon. That is the one thing this team has been missing for the last several years now. If there were somebody who could play off of Shea and knock down 40% of 8 threes a game, then it's really like, how do you beat the Thunder?
Without sacrificing, like, defense. Because, like, yeah, like, you got an Isaiah Joe, but yeah.
But it also has to be on a good value contract, which is where Trey is at a pretty good dollar value. But obviously that's just adding significantly more value than a Lou Dort to this team, not just because Trey Murphy is a much better player than Lou Dort, but also because his skill set is so much more specifically necessary for this team. They have several elite perimeter guard defenders. They have 0 elite volume three-point shooters with that sort of offensive juice in that way. So I definitely think they should consider it. Obviously, they have all the assets to do something exactly like this. And I do think there comes a point where maybe they look back and they're like, damn, maybe that's what cost us the title this year specifically. But I also think the Thunder are going to win multiple titles. And I also think them holding on to these draft picks has overall been greatly to their benefit, because they have been the best drafting team in the NBA. And that even includes some like straight up diamonds in the rough. That even includes getting AJ Mitchell in the second round last year. Like, they're just an incredible organization. And I think they're in an incredible spot, even though we're saying all these things that are going badly right now. I think we do still have to kind of zoom out and consider where the Thunder are at, and consider last year, dude, how much of this we had to endure. And look, this year, I want to be clear. I've said so many things about how all-time great the Thunder are. I understand if people want to take this opportunity to say, hey, you overrated them or whatever. But, bro, after they lost in the in-season tournament, people were saying the Thunder can't win the title. And it's like, I do think when they lose, it looks particularly ugly because it is this kind of stagnant style of like a lot of spot-up shooters going cold, and you're kind of like, it's really unappetizing to watch, right? There isn't the sort of movement and multiple offensive creators that you might see in a different situation that would at least make the losses look less ugly, I suppose. But people key in on that stuff so much, and it's like, they're the best team. They're the best team. They've proven that time and again, so let's give them the respect that is owed, and let's not overdo it, especially when one of these losses is to the scrappy Phoenix Suns, Logan, a team that has just continued to impress. You're looking at them right now, 22-15, 7 seed in the West. How legit are these Suns, Logan?
They're definitely a playoff team. I just got to give props to scrappy is the right word, man. I just want to give props to Phoenix and Matt Ishbia in this front office for retooling in the way they have so quickly. Like, I thought the Suns were going to be one of the worst teams in basketball this year. I can't lie. I thought Devin Booker may be a trade candidate by the trade deadline with how bad they looked. And I think the Suns have just constructed such a good roster of complementary role players to Devin Booker and guys who are going and committed to doing the little stuff. You know, we were talking about, and obviously Book is a way better player, but like, we're talking about like the ideal roster that you would need to put around like a Trae Young or something like that. But like, these are all guys who are committed to doing like the little things. Mm-hmm. And I do want to give credit to two guys outside. Devin Booker makes this thing go, right? Devin Booker is the reason the Suns live and die with D-Book, obviously. But I do want to give some props to some of the other guys on this roster. The first guy is Dillon Brooks. And I kind of can't believe it.
You owe him an apology.
I've hated Dillon Brooks with a burning passion for a couple of years now because I think I thought he was a goober, and I still think Dillon Brooks has some gooberish tendencies, but he's just a good basketball player now. I don't know if I would still – he's one of those guys, like, you hate him when he's on the other team, but you love him when he's on your team because he's a little irritant, he's a little pest, but, like, the guy has just tangibly improved. He's shooting 46% on pull-up jumpers, the most staggering number to me. He has an effective field goal percentage 11% higher in the paint than he did last season. He is just finishing so exceptionally well. The guy's scoring 20 points per game this year, and he's a plus defensively. Like, Brooks has just been legitimately great for this team. So is Colin Gillespie, who I didn't think was an NBA player a year ago. When I watch him play, he plays kind of like a he gives me like a diet D-Book or a diet Jamal Murray kind of feel when I watch him play, just in terms of his movement style. The guy's shooting 52% on catch-and-shoot jumpers this year. That's the best of anybody shooting 3 or more a game. And then on top of guys like that, you're just getting elite role player production out of guys like Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, who are shooting great from behind the arc. They move the ball within structure so well. They're defending their asses off. And then great defenders. Oso Ighodaro has really impressed me defensively this year. So is Mark Williams. Ryan Dunn as well. Like, Phoenix, scrappy. They've got a ton of heart, and they have their number one. I don't think Phoenix is going to go on a run or anything like that. Like, I think there is a pretty hard cap on this team as like a second-round exit. I think that's their ceiling. But this has gone better than I could have ever expected, and I think they have – I don't know if I want to say, like, maxed out around D-Book, but, like, they were playing as good as I could have expected. I don't want to sound like a pessimist. I don't know, man. Like, I'm just kind of wondering what they do with Jalen Green. That's kind of my big question about them the rest of this year. Like, the guys played 2 games. I kind of wonder – and I know some people – and I don't want – I feel like I'm pouring water on the Suns right now.
Just speak the truth.
I just kind of wonder if Jalen Green's going to fuck it up when he comes back. And I know some people are really optimistic about what he could bring to this team, but, like, I don't think they need him. I think I think it's working as it's supposed to right now, and the Suns have really tapped in to something that works. D-Book is your lead guy, and I haven't even talked about D-Book. D-Book has come and this has been more of a year-over-year thing than just like all of a sudden this year. D-Book is so good as a playmaker now, too, and getting all of his teammates involved, and he's so committed on the defensive end right now as well. Like, I'm impressed with D-Book, too. So I think they did a really good job retooling in this offseason because I thought the Suns were in one of the worst positions of any franchise in basketball. You lose KD, you lose CP3, you lose Bridges, you lose Ayton, like all of this core that went to the finals, a few years ago. They're a completely different basketball team, but I think they have masterfully retooled. My only hang-up is Jaylen Green and how the ripple effects, how he looks when he comes back.
I am not high on Jaylen Green. I think everybody knows that. Obviously, he is going to figure into their plans significantly when he's healthy because he was like the prize jewel of the KD trade for them, which not great in my opinion. But I agree with you a lot. There's a duality in the sense that I do think right now they are overly reliant on an offensive player like Dillon Brooks. And you could optimistically look at Jaylen Green and say, is he the guy who can step up as that second scorer, second offensive option for you? Personally, I don't think that he moves the needle in any way. I just think he's too inefficient, too inconsistent, so erratic as a pull-up shooter and not a good playmaker. I would just be out on the Jaylen Green business. And like you said, if you insert kind of a higher volume, low efficiency, very flawed offensive player like that who has been able to hang in there on some really good team defenses. We saw it with Houston. He can hold his own. I mean, he's just a good athlete with solid positional size, but is he actually additive for this team when their identity is clicking on so many ways right now and he doesn't really meaningfully contribute in terms of impacting the game in the ways that they need and maybe could step on some toes and maybe this defense isn't as connected and on a string with him out there? I don't think that he solves anything for this team. I don't think that he makes them any better when he does get back out there. But I guess we got to start with the negative there. There's way, way more positive to say about the Suns because I've been so impressed by them this year. I completely underestimated this team, flat out. And the guy who I want to give the most credit to for that is Jordan Ott. He is phenomenal. He is one of the best coaches in the NBA. In fact, right now, he would be my coach of the year. We actually have some awesome coach of the year candidates, Logan. We talked about this so much in the NFL this year. It might just be the year of the coach, 2025 into 2026. What Mitch Johnson has done with the Spurs, what Joe Mazzulla has done with the Celtics. There's a lot of really damn good coaches out there, but I think Ott has done the most to elevate the talent on his roster of any of these guys. He has this team so fully bought in. He's such a good game planner. And you see that against these really good teams, like who the Suns have played very well. That's the thing. They're not just beating up bottom feeders, but then they look totally outclassed against the great teams. No, they have beaten the Thunder. They forced Wemby into his worst game of the year. They've owned the Lakers, who everybody knows I don't think are really very good, but in terms of record, they're towards the top of the West. That stuff's impressive. He gets a lot of credit for that. He's also just getting career best production out of several guys. Like, obviously, Dillon Brooks has been a revelation, and I think a lot of the credit goes to him just because so much of it is shot-making improvement. It's not like, oh, let's put Dillon in more favorable spots in a way that nobody ever thought to before. It's just Dillon Brooks being better, but nevertheless, a guy having a career season for this team. Really, though, a couple guys like Gillespie. I mean, seeing what Ott has seen in him, empowering him in this sort of role where he's been one of the most improved players this year, that's huge. Jordan Goodwin, I just think is good. And he plays a lot of minutes for this team, deservedly so. And he's the sort of scrappy two-way player who they need. And that's where I do think the defensive end is absolutely what makes this team what they are. And they're so connected on that side of the ball, which I think is such a testament to great coaching. So shout out to Ott because he was kind of the unknown variable for me. I didn't really have a strong opinion about that hire one way or another. It's been an absolute home run. He has been a genuine floor raiser for this team in a way that you don't often see from coaches, but just with the culture and the preparation that he's embedded, how seriously this team takes the regular season, and just the pride that they have when, like, so easily their identity could have been, ah, man, fuck. Remember when we tried to make that move for Kevin Durant and it blew up in our faces and everything went wrong, and now we're just in this weird transitional period where we've got Devin Booker and God knows what else, and they so easily could have punted, and it could have been all right, let's look to make that book trade. And instead, it's been the exact opposite. They are squeezing every last bit of juice out of the talent they have. Defensively, that's where they grind out most of these games. 9th in defensive rating, number 1 in steals per game, even over OKC, Logan. 10.6 steals per game. That is like a exceptionally high number in the modern NBA. And they're second in the NBA in points off turnover. So they have that defense into offense formula in their own right. And they're such a smart defense. That's the thing. Like, the cliche is they play on a string, right? When we talk about them being connected, it really is true in terms of their team defense, in terms of their help in rotations. They are just on the same page consistently. They also have the athletes to bring ball pressure and contain the ball. They have guys who bring the physicality, who speed you up, who make you uncomfortable. We saw that against the Lakers, where they forced that backcourt, specifically Austin Reeves, into some really rough performances and turnovers. We saw how well they collectively played Shea and the Thunder, executing the kind of scheme that we've been talking about. I still think their most impressive defensive performance of the year is the one against Wemby, where they were just so damn feisty and so damn good in terms of guarding him with those wings who could present problems for him physically, get up in his handle, swarming him with so many doubles, and just like creating a really muddy picture for him, making him uncomfortable. They have the ability to do that in a way that is rare in the NBA, and they've just got a lot of really solid defenders. They don't have like 4 or 5 all defense guys like the Thunder do. Of course, they're not as good a defense as the Thunder. Nobody is. But my point is, it's not so much about, what exceptional individual defenders. They have some really good guys, but
like we're talking about Trae, man, it's a weak point league.
Bang. Exactly. They just have really good overall perimeter size, length, athleticism, guys who can switch, guys who play good team defense, guys who do the right things out there. So it's just a really good operation overall. And they need to get the absolute most out of their talent defensively to be competitive. That's where, again, I give so much credit to the coach. But if you look at the big situation, Mark Williams, he's been pretty good for them. Oso Ighodaro, we saw good minutes from him last year. He's just continued to emerge as like a really good backup small ball 5 for them. And everybody does their job out here. And that's where I agree with you. Maybe not having Jalen Green is helping them on that front. Having this clear identity of like dudes who are just hard workers and who scrap out there and who feel like they've been counted out. It's kind of like this incredible island of misfit toys. I went on a rant on the State of the League podcast recently where I said, look, people can't convince me to like the Suns as this, oh my God, what a miracle story, when Dillon Brooks and Grayson Allen are still dirty as fuck. And I don't forget that, and they show you that every once in a while. Other than that, though, I really do like this team. And even those guys, again, like they're having career seasons. It's just, fuck those guys still, because they do nasty stuff out there. Dillon Brooks is still a deeply unlikable basketball player. Grayson Allen is still an extremely dirty player. I mean, he literally hit Gershon Yabusele with a flying knee last year. I don't know. You can't convince me to like Grayson Allen. But that doesn't matter because the Suns are winning basketball games and they're doing it on the back of heart and culture, and that's impressive. And I didn't see it happening.
Neither did I. It's one of the most unexpected stories, I think, of this NBA season. Just to add one of the numbers, not to add fuel to the fire, but the Rockets were 9.5 points per 100 possessions better without Jalen Green last season.
Dude, add fuel to the fire. Yeah, he's not an additive basketball player. He's not a plus.
I guess what I'm saying is I would have – Jalen would be on kind of a short leash for me. Like –
I'd rather not play him, but
I mean, me too.
Again, they got him back for KD, so they're going to play him.
Kind of have to, yeah.
And I think some fans are like, "He's our star of the future."
They're excited.
Like, no, he's not.
I just don't. Yeah, I just don't fundamentally feel different about him, and things are clicking right now, man. But you know what? I will say, maybe if there's one guy who can get the max out of Jalen Green, maybe it is Jordan Knott.
Yeah, in terms of him, like, competing, sure, but I do think there are just skill limitations with him that people don't fully get, where people are like, oh my God, he's such a supreme talent. And he's just fundamentally not like nearly as good a pull-up shooter as people think. Well, it's not just shot selection. It's shot selection with his skill set. And the fact that, like, he also just doesn't necessarily have the level of functional athleticism to get to the rim as much as I thought he would as a prospect. So he doesn't get to the rim much. He relies so much on volume three-point shooting where he is ultimately inefficient and very erratic. And then again, I mean, he's not bringing plus value in any other area of the game. So that's enough on Jalen Green for now. But yeah, he's not changing things for this team. He's not making things better. And offensively, that is where this team is ultimately going to run into their hard ceiling. I just don't think there's enough there to be like, the Suns are more than the prototypical feisty first-round exit. And again, it's a success that they've gotten to that spot. It's a testament to their ability to max out what they have on paper. But they are a good volume shooting team, especially if Book can break out of this extended three-point shooting slump he's on, where last year was such a down year. This year's been even more of a down year. He's always been more of an elite jump shooter from the mid-range, but he also used to be consistently 36-37% from three. For him to be like down in the low 30s, below 30 this year, back-to-back years, that's weird. But they have a lot of good shooting overall. Guys like Gillespie and Grayson Allen, they can absolutely stripe it at volume. They're a top 5 offensive rebounding team, so they create some margin there. Shout out Mark Williams on that front, and they've got a lot of dogs who compete there. But they are a 37th percentile half-court offense, and I just worry about the lack of true creators outside of Book, who even himself is not like typical lead, supreme advantage creator, elite playmaker, just make everything go for an offense. I think that Book is great because of his offensive versatility, but he doesn't just like carry an offense on his own. And then I do think they're too reliant on Dillon Brooks, who's having a career season. I mean, all the numbers that you mentioned, dude, overall on 2-pointers, he's shooting 7% better than last year, as he's taken on way more offensive volume. To take on way more responsibility and get more efficient like that is incredible. He's 51% in the paint outside the restricted area, and he's 46% from mid-range. So he's just straight up been a really good shot maker, one of the better in the league on those intermediate shots that he's really reliant on. Is that sustainable, though? It's been sustained for 30-something games. I don't think so, big picture. Like, it's possible that he's just taken a leap as a shooter at this age, maybe, but I can't bank on it. And the other problem is he is so reliant on those shots as somebody who doesn't get to the rim and as somebody who is, even this year, like, not a very efficient three-point shooter. I mean, he's had better three-point shooting seasons, but he loves the mid-range shot diet overall, those tough shots. He's, throughout his career, taken too many of them. He happens to be making them this year, but even shooting them as well as he has been this year, he's still just at 56% true shooting, which is below league average. And he's a bad decision maker, not a good passer, who does have a very shoot first, take tough shots kind of mindset. So it's working well enough now as he's making these shots at an exceptional clip, way beyond anything we've seen from him. But he's walking a very fine line. And if that shot making regresses more to what we're used to from him, then I think having Dillon Brooks as your second option offensively can be very problematic. So that's where I think the Suns are going to run into all of these concrete limitations. But they are good. They are a legitimately good basketball team. They are not just like, hey, we're going to be in the play-in. Like you said, they should be a playoff team. I mean, they've shown us more certainly than any of the teams below them in the standings. And yeah, they kind of have that regular season feel of maxing out everything they can, and ultimately more talented teams lock in for the playoffs and maybe they separate. But it's a really impressive accomplishment all the same. I did not see it coming at all. I thought the Suns were going to suck this year, and they've been good. There's another team that's overachieving expectations, Logan, although they did just lose to the Denver Nuggets without Nikola Jokic. And by the way, 3-2 since Jokic went down. Peyton Watson, Logan, 24.4 points per game. Speaking of shooting improvements, that guy is clearly dramatically improved as a three-point shooter. But other than that, the Celtics have been on top of the world. They'd won 8 of 9 before that. Jaylen Brown, some people are now trying to put in MVP talks. Let's check back in on this team, Logan, that's continually been impressive throughout the year. But what is the ceiling for Boston, and does Jaylen Brown deserve all that hype? Does he belong in the MVP conversation?
I would say on the ceiling point, I think it depends on how Tatum looks when and if he comes back this season.
Can I ask you this real quick?
Sure.
Because when we had this conversation like a month ago, I was already saying if Tatum comes back, I think they're probably my favorite in the East. You were much lower on them at that time. Have you been moved on that?
No, I think they're a
Really?
second round. I think they're a second round exit.
But you were saying you liked like Toronto more than them. Have we moved past that?
My thing with Boston, I don't think they're below Toronto. I just think there's too many defensive liabilities to attack. This is a team that's playing Ant Simons. You know, I know he doesn't play as much as some of these other guards.
Ant Simons playing the feistiest hoops of his career. I mean, he is still a bad defender. But
and Derek White. But, like, you got Luka Garza and Keita giving you minutes. I just feel like
Keita's been good defensively.
Keita's good.
Quite good as a rim protector.
But, I mean, you see it in this Denver game. I mean, they just went at Garza over and over again and abused him.
We're not even playing Garza in the playoffs. It's Tatum small ball 5 minutes when Keita's not out there.
Jaylen Brown has some of his turnover issues in this game against Denver, too. Like, I think those issues are going to rear their ugly head in a playoff series to where they're going to get bounced in the second round at best. I don't think Boston's talented enough. I mean, I don't want to,
with Tatum out there. Wow.
I mean, dude, Jaylen Brown is playing the best basketball of his career. I don't know, dude. Can I really expect Tatum to be back 100% off an Achilles tear? Like, you're going to ask the guy to ramp up and be great 2 to 3 months in a return. I have red flags about Boston. I know the East is weak. Second round exit is where I would say Boston's ceiling is right now. Jaylen Brown, though, I think would probably be top 5 in MVP conversations. The guy's just playing the best basketball of his career. He's giving you 36-5. That's a rounded 30-5, but still, I mean, amazing. On 50, 37, 77 splits, 59.1% true shooting with 7.2 free throw attempts per game. Jaylen Brown's giving you career highs in points per game, assists per game, free throw attempts per game. And, you know, some people will go, oh, he's got the ball in his hands. It's on career efficiency as well.
Yeah.
Career high in field goal percentage and true shooting percentage. The two biggest differences to me are, I mean, JB is getting legitimately shifty with his handle. Like, he has actual counters and he's got an actual bag now. And the biggest difference is he's shooting an effective field goal percentage over 10% higher on pull-up jumpers than last season. He has just been a completely different shooter of the basketball. So, look, I feel kind of similarly about Boston the way I did about Phoenix. I thought Boston was going to be one of the worst teams in basketball this year, near the bottom of the East, hanging out with Chicago in the cellar of the Eastern Conference. Boston's just legitimately good. Joe Mazzulla is a damn good coach, and there's more talent than I thought here at the beginning of this season. And yes, I think Jaylen Brown is an MVP candidate. Like, am I crazy for saying I think he'd be over Luka for me, man? That's kind of where I'm at with JB.
Crazy take. That's not a crazy take. I will say this. The MVP conversation doesn't exist right now. There is no MVP conversation. There's one guy who's the MVP, you this too? And it's Shea, because Jokic, Wemby, they aren't going to be eligible. Yes.
Is Boston still your favorite in the East?
If Jason Tatum plays and looks anything like himself, yeah, I would take them. Now, if he's not out there, no. But I still think even if he's not out there, my expectation would be that they win a round. They make the second round. Like, they're just so impressive. And I do think they're, like, specifically built to just drop Jason Tatum right back into this mix, and he fills the gaps this team does have. Because I think their defense, the fact that they're 15th without him in defensive rating is an achievement to me, because I actually thought this offense was going to be really good. I didn't think they were going to be second in offensive rating, but I thought the defense, the rebounding, the front court stuff was all going to be worse than it has been. They are a bad defensive rebounding team. Well, that changes when you bring in the best defensive rebounding forward possibly in the NBA in Jason Tatum, and a guy who is just another extremely switchable, versatile, huge plus defender. I don't see why they couldn't be a top 10 defense with him out there on the floor. Then you're talking about a starting 5 that has like several strong plus defenders. I mean, you have a core of Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, and Keita has been a good rim protector. And then, like, you also have dudes off the bench who scrap. Like, Jordan Walsh is a really good defender and a really good all-around sort of dirty work role player. I don't know if Hugo Gonzalez is playing in the playoffs this year, but I'll tell you what, I like him, man. He plays his ass off. He competes. I just think they've got this really balanced group of, like, those dirty work role players, guys who are great defensively, who are good on the offensive glass because they've been a really good offensive rebounding team. And then they've got several really good ball handlers. Like, Derek White hasn't had his best offensive season, but Peyton Pritchard and Anthony Simons, those are just dynamic pull-up shooters. Those are shifty guys. Those are like legitimate pick-and-roll weapons and volume three-point shooting weapons, and they're overall an elite shooting team. They're number one in threes made. They're towards the top of the league in three-point percentage. So I look at all of that, and I'm like, okay, they've got some good role players in the front court. They've got some guards who can really shoot in the backcourt. They've got an elite spot-up player like Sam Hauser. All of this is just built to have two awesome mismatch attacking, volume scoring, two-way wings right at the middle of it all. And especially a guy like Tatum, who is such a plus rebounder and who is like a truly gifted playmaker in a way that Jaylen Brown obviously is not. And boom, you put all that together. What's missing from this team? Like, I could just see them running through the East. I don't know. I can see Tatum and Brown being efficient individually and, again, creating opportunities for others if it's out of the post-up game, drawing help, or if it's the drive and kick, all the stuff they've done before, and they've got a shit ton of shooting all around them.
What do you make? Have you heard any about these? I've been reading a bunch about the Celtics being really interested in Big Zoo. What do you make of that?
That's pretty fucking sexy, man. I hadn't even seen that. Oh, my God. Yeah, they'd be my favorite in the East by far.
I'm seeing everybody talking about, I don't know, they're talking about giving up. I've heard a couple of packages like Simons and Shireman and some picks or something like that. I've also seen like maybe, I wouldn't want to give up Pritchard and somebody else, but yeah. I am hearing a ton of traction that Boston
Pritchard's
is really
is just so insane. You can't give up Pritchard
in getting Zoo.
Dude, I'd be interested as all hell in that too, because I mean the front court has overachieved my expectations. Keita is obviously still not your typical contender starting center, even though he's again totally overachieved what I expected from him. But if you get Zoo in there, now I'm like, can the Boston Celtics win the NBA title, Logan? Because winning the East and winning the title have been two different conversations this year. Somebody's got to win the East. Who is going to be able to beat OKC or Denver out of the West, or even San Antonio, Houston? Like, the best teams have just clearly been in the West. If they get a legitimate kick-ass, two-way, play finishing, mismatch attacking, rim protecting, great rebounder on both sides of the ball, it's purely theoretical. That would make me love the Celtics even more. But I think this entire season is just a testament to organizational excellence, dude. Joe Mazzulla just continues to cement his status as one of the absolute best, if not the best coach in the NBA. Brad Stevens, just this lineage they've had of the Ainge-Stevens GM head coach pairing into now, there was obviously Ime Udoka for a time. Even he was a really good coach, but Mazzulla's even better. And now him and Stevens as GM, like they just are operating at such a high level from the top of the organization all the way down. They find good players on the margins. They get the most out of those players. So that's really what this Celtics season is mostly about. Jaylen Brown playing unbelievably well. And I love him because he's a Cal Bear, but I have also been critical of him relative to his perception as an NBA player. I've been lower on Jaylen Brown in recent years than the consensus. This year, like, what is there to be critical of? I don't know. We can nitpick, but he's been really awesome in this role as the number one option, as this team needed to take on more offensive volume and be the best he's ever been. He's done that. All that being said, the Celtics are a plus 5.5 net team with him on and a plus 9 net team with him off. Obviously, Jaylen Brown is by far the Celtics' best player. He's great. My point is, they are winning because of the totality of this roster and what they're getting out of the bench minutes and what they're getting out of all these role players and the shooting they do have up and down this roster. It's the totality of what Boston is doing that is so awesome. But also, Jaylen Brown is playing like a clear top 20 guy, and I think some people will say, like, that's not high enough. And what I mean is the level he's playing at is enough to, like, big picture say this is a top 20 guy, not just to say, oh, he's been one of the 20 best players this season. Like, I think, as you're saying, he should be a top 5 MVP candidate. But I'm saying my overall view of Jaylen Brown as a player is being moved by how well he's playing in this stretch. And his efficiency bottom line, like if you just look at true shooting percentage, it's not going to look exceptional. It's good this year. But the context to consider is how much is coming from him in this on-ball role, where players are just generally less efficient when you're being asked to create the offense for yourself. Jaylen Brown this year, if you look at all the creation play types across them all, 98th percentile creation volume. So he's creating as much as like anybody not named Shea, Luka, right? Just a few guys. 89th percentile creation relative true shooting. So when you consider how he is getting his shots, the efficiency to me becomes more impressive. He does have the turnover problems, which you're absolutely right to mention, but the pull-up shooting that we're seeing from him, to be so elite from the mid-range, 52% in the paint non-restricted area, having his best three-point shooting season in a long time, 41% on pull-up threes. We'll need to see if he can sustain this. That's kind of going to be the question for him. But as he is, just with the combination of the physical tools that he has, his size, his ability to shoot over people, his strength, what he can already do as a driver downhill and a finisher and a transition scorer, Jaylen Brown has just been one of the best scorers in basketball this year. Now, he still does have his limitations as a playmaker. He's taken on a little more there, and he can make the basic reads. He's not somebody I would ideally entrust my entire offense to, and I understand maybe that's like, what? Because they're number 2 in offensive rating. I do think the Celtics' offensive situation was underrated coming into the year, and I said that. Like, there's so much shooting around him. There's so much space. Their principles are so great. So it is really an optimal situation for a scoring wing like him, even if you don't look at their roster and say, well, there's not a ton of other stars out there. There are players who complement a player like him really well, but he's doing everything that you could possibly expect from him, everything you could possibly ask. So in terms of the MVP conversation, like I said, and I understand maybe people are going to be like, but the Thunder are struggling right now. There's just no way you can look at anybody else who is eligible for this award and say the totality of their body of work this year comes close to Shea doing what he's doing, elevating their offense by 11 points in terms of offensive rating, going 19-1 like he did without J-Dub. Like, that's what I saw Scalabrini say. Oh, what would happen for Shea if you took away J-Dub and you took away Chet? And it's like, well, without J-Dub, they were the best team in the league by far. In the minutes he plays without Chet, I don't know, he's got like a plus 18, 19 net rating or something. What Shea is doing to elevate his team's offense right now while being a plus defensively with this sort of ridiculous offensive efficiency, the impact that comes from that, it's just not touched by anybody who's going to be eligible to win this award. But after that, yeah, Jaylen Brown has got just about as good a case as anybody. Like, you start getting into like the Maxey, Cade, Brunson tier. There's just not a lot of really compelling candidates after Shea. And obviously, Luka, you already mentioned him. That's why I didn't bring him up immediately. But yeah, when I think about Jason Tatum being dropped back in here, and I look at them compared to the rest of the East, and of course there are things we can nitpick with this Celtics roster, but nothing more significant than anybody else. And I think their offense is truly elite, and I think that defense is legitimately good with Jason Tatum on the floor.
I'd give Boston a punching chance. I still like Detroit the most out of the East, I think, right now. And I know how you feel about Detroit, but I think
Detroit's
that's who
really
I'm
good.
rocking with.
I think I undersold them coming into the year, early in the year. I would still take Boston. I don't know. The offensive firepower difference and the variety of offensive sources that they have compared to how much Detroit puts on Cade.
That's an advantage for Boston. And
then I look at them compared to the Knicks, and I'm like, I think they're a better offense and a better defense. I look at the Cavs. I am still very optimistic about. I know everybody else is done. Honestly, the Cavs would still be my second because now Darius Garland looks like himself again, baby. Last 10 games, Garland has been hooping on him, and that changes everything, and that makes that offense just about as good as any in the NBA. But I still think they have more defensive weak points, so I just think Boston with Jason Tatum, they obviously lost a couple of really key players, we thought. I think they've done a nice job of replacing and finding other talented players who've been able to step up. And if you give me the foundation of this coaching with the wing tandem they've had, with all the shooting they have, with what should be a pretty good team defense, there's a reason Boston's been king of the East in recent years, that they've been the most consistently great team. I don't think they've lost as much of their formula as we initially would have thought.
I like the take. And Boston's a lot better than I expected. I didn't expect Boston.
They're third in net rating, man.
Yeah.
Jason Tatum hasn't played a minute. They're third in net rating.
I didn't think Boston was going to, be anywhere close to this. I thought they were going to be in that play-in tier. So, I mean, they've blown me away. But I'm just not as optimistic about Tatum being available to go 100% in a playoff run immediately.
No, I get it. I have no idea what to expect there. Like, genuinely no idea. And my take has been, be careful, be conservative, preserve his long-term health. But if they really feel like he's ready to go, and we've been hearing rumblings from the jump that this is an abnormally great recovery process, we just don't know. I'm not saying that I have any true level of confidence in Tatum coming out there and being himself. I'm saying if that happens, then I think I like Boston more than anybody in the East. What has been crazy to see is Boston without Tatum, third in net rating. Just you think about them as being a top dog in the East, of course, that lost their best player. The Indiana Pacers, other top dog in the East, lost their best player. They were in Game 7 of the Finals last year. 6-31 without Tyrese Halliburton. I know I've already talked about it so many times, and my Hallie Glaze is probably too much, but bro, they're 1-16 on the road. They're on pace to have the fourth worst road record since the merger. And early in the year, they were really banged up. Gotten a lot healthier. And with Nembhard and Mathurin and Siakam and all these guys out there, they still flat out fucking suck. And Siakam makes it sound like they don't want to suck. He makes it sound like they want to compete. And they're still losing to everybody. But I do think it's the best thing for them long term because, one, it establishes Hallie's supremacy beyond doubt, beyond comparison. This is like if you fucking took David Robinson off the 96 Spurs, which they did for the 97 Spurs, and they go from one of the best teams in the league to one of the worst, and then that gets them Tim Duncan. That's what the Pacers are going to do with A.J. DeBonsa.
Yeah, they retraded for their pick during the finals, man.
Genius.
Crazy. Clairvoyance.
Genius. Clairvoyant, man. Shout out Kevin Pritchard. Another great organization. Shout out to all the great organizations in the NBA, man. Something of a theme of this episode. And shout out to all of you guys for hanging out with us as we talk some basketball. I love the NBA more than anything, Logan, more than my own family, more than myself. But the NFL right now, of course, it's got my attention even more. I mean, we got the playoffs, baby. This Jags-Bills game, I can't stop thinking about it. It's my true love against my new love, if you will. Obviously, my allegiances are clearly with the Bills, but it's kind of crazy having immediately such a high-stakes matchup. You know, like recent years, it's been like the Bills play the Steelers in the first round, or they play the Broncos last year. Now, you got to go up against some of the best of the best. It's going to be a big-ass game. And also, I can't stop thinking about your Steelers, Logan, and Perk Rodgers, and how badly I want them to win that game, because I love Aaron Rodgers, and you and I, we've had some concerning conversations with our friends recently that make me worry about Aaron Rodgers' legacy and how much he's going to be underrated, and it would be pretty fucking cool if he got a playoff win at 42. I don't think it's going to happen, but I hope to God it does. All that to say, Sunday night, Monday night, and even Saturday night, we will see you guys here to talk about all the NFL playoff games this weekend live, baby. So you know where to find us. All across our YouTube channel is all that stuff. You can listen to the podcast across all audio platforms, and you can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh, to see graphics, clips from the show, and all of our short-form trivia content. Logan, is there anything you want to say about Perk Rodgers before we wrap this puppy up?
Give them all to him. Give him 10, give him 20, however many he needs. Feed them all.
I think you need him maybe heavily sedated, because otherwise a 42-year-old body is going to feel a lot of pain and maybe even fear against the Houston Texans defense. But if you just get him out there and he's just cool, calm, collected, eyes maybe a little bit closed, and just trusting his gut and slinging that thing around the yard, who can stop Perk Rodgers, bro? Nobody. That's my take.
You ever seen that interview with him?
Where
what was wrong with you, Aaron? My knee.
Oh,
that's a good one, bro.
So funny.
That's a classic.
Oh my God. Dude, I mentioned this when we were shooting TikToks, but that hasn't come out yet, so this is the breaking news. My TikTok has only been serving me Aaron Rodgers edits recently, and it's the most wonderful thing, and like it inspires me. It makes me want to do great things on his behalf, even though he's a super strange guy. He's a Cal Bears legend, and I will always love him for that. So, Aaron Rodgers, go out there, do your thing. We'll see you guys this weekend. Can't wait. Bart Scott, can't wait. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.